What is going on, everybody? It is JT here with JT Invests in You, and I'm super excited to bring you this conversation today. Today we have Austin from xBacked DAO on the show, and xBacked DAO is another sort of a lending protocol, and they're introducing decentralized stablecoins to the market and a DAO, of course. So without further ado, let me just introduce Austin. Let's see. Here we go. Awesome. Austin, how you doing?
Good, JT. Good. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Man, appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. There aren't too many people in yet, but for those listening currently, if you have any questions or comments, just drop those in the chat. We will certainly get to those towards the end of the episode. But how about we just dive right into it, Austin? If you could just tell my audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background about you, real quick, and we'll start from there.
Yeah, definitely. So my background, started way back in primary school, and I wanted to create video games. And I feel like that's a pretty common path for programmers. They went down the I want to make video games route, or they went down the modding Minecraft route, or they went down the I'm going to hack websites route. So I began building games and that sort of thing, learning programming. And then during high school, got more interested in hacking. Never actually hacked anything, but it's how I actually got into web development. And as soon as I figured out I could build products, that's what I realized. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do with programming. So I spent most of the last couple of years of high school building websites and that sort of thing. And then left high school, began university, and then started working at startups. And so really crazy ride, the first startup I worked at. It was like Tinder for jobs back in the day.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate because the team there was extremely talented. So I learned very quickly I was nothing special, which I think is an important lesson to learn, honestly, early on. And so I learned a lot at that SaaS company. And then I've worked at a few others, and I've done DevOps as well. So I've not just done building front ends, building back ends, but I've also done the infrastructure, cloud, scaling, that sort of thing. And then more recently did product management. So I went through a fintech incubator with an Australian bank. I'm based in Australia. And that was a really, really fun experience. And it taught me a lot. Most importantly, it taught me being good at programming wasn't enough to build a really great product. And it was around this time I really started looking into DeFi and Web3. And it had kind of been there through university. I had a friend who was super into Ethereum. He was working at a crypto company in 2017, and I thought he was crazy. But here I am.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was always in the background. But when I started looking into it, I realized there was something really exciting going on that I wanted to be a part of. And so I did a year of product management at a SaaS company. Loved it. And then I got the opportunity to begin xBacked, and here we are, 6 to 8 months later.
Well, it's a perfect background. I mean, that's a great segue into what is xBacked. Why don't you just do a little deep dive on the project itself?
Definitely, yeah. So xBacked is a decentralized stablecoin, and that's our core offering, right? The goal of products like this, or products like ALGO and Folks Finance, to increase the capital efficiency of DeFi in an ecosystem like Algorand. And so along with that, we'll have a very capital efficient model where you can borrow up to 120% to a 120% collateral ratio, and you'll get liquidated at 110%, and we can get into that a little bit later. And the other thing that's really important and that differentiates us from stable and other decentralized stablecoins is we have a redemptions mechanism. And so when xUSD drops below the $1, even a little bit further than that, it becomes worthwhile to redeem xUSD. And that means you can swap one xUSD token for $1 of underlying collateral from the protocol. So I guess that's a bit about xBacked. And then as well as that, that's our core product. And then around that will be the DAO. And who knows what other products might offshoot from that. But at the moment, that's our core focus.
Of course. Now, I'd like to hear that because, my very next question was what, differentiates xBacked from its competitors. And that is something that is a little bit concerning for some people regarding, the AlgoFi stable token. Sometimes it loses its peg, not too drastically yet, but, it could. It certainly could if the market reached a capitulation point. So that is really cool to hear. I actually wasn't aware of the redemption process. Is it a simple process?
Yeah. For users on the front end, it should be as easy as just clicking a button to redeem xUSD and like the amount you would like to redeem. And I think something that some people have gotten confused with, you don't need an open vault to do that. You can, like, if you see xUSD is trading below peg, you can go buy it at a DEX and then come and redeem it through the protocol.
And that's sort of like a built-in arbitrage mechanism, sort of also.
Correct. That's right.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't see it on the testnet. I mean, as you can see right here, I do have the testnet up.
Nice.
Yeah, I didn't see that option on the testnet when I gave it a quick glance, but that is a really, really interesting concept, and I do quite appreciate that you put some thought into that.
Yeah, it's not on testnet at the moment. We're planning to release that probably in the next couple of weeks. We were just getting the smart contract side done. So you might have seen last week we did a smart contract upgrade, and with that, we shipped redemption.
Perfect. And when do you plan to go live?
In mainnet?
Yeah.
So that's the super fun part about Web3 and something I'm not used to coming from SaaS, is in SaaS you can ship every day and do all sorts of things. In Web3, you obviously need to go through an audit, and an audit can take anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. So we're booked in with runtime to begin in mid-March, and that should take roughly 6 to 8 weeks. So we're looking at late May or very early June for mainnet.
Yeah, I mean, the differences for Web 2 versus Web 3 really comes down to the smart contracts. I mean, if you're creating a smart contract that can't be upgraded, you really want to be sure it gets out properly, because you can't just send out an update, tomorrow and fix all the bugs. So that, of course, security is of course key significance. Are there multiple types of stable coins or just xUSD?
Excellent question. So for the foreseeable future, and I treat that as 2022, we will just be focusing on xUSD. Mostly because in Algorand there's not a lot of liquidity at the moment, so we need the ecosystem to grow more, and we also need to see a pretty strong demand from the community for a decentralized euro stablecoin or a decentralized, other foreign exchange currency. So we'll see what happens. It's definitely, looking in the far future on the roadmap, but for the near future, I don't think it's realistic.
Perfect. And on the testnet, the collateral to be supplied is currently only Algorand, with GoBTC and GoETH soon to be coming. Will those be the three assets to supply collateral when you go live on mainnet, or will there be others?
Yeah, so when we go live, we'll probably just begin with ALGO and then pretty quickly add GoETH, GoBTC. And then for the third non-ALGO collateral, there's multiple options, I guess. We could go a more centralized route and introduce USDC as a collateral type. We could keep it decentralized, and I think that's what the community would like to see. And we could look at other ASAs that have strong liquidity profiles. And I think the key thing actually is whatever tokens we list, they have to have a utility or a product backing them. Yeah. They can't just be a random token, obviously, because a really large risk to the protocol is we introduced bad collateral, which affects the peg.
Yeah, even the most stable and seemingly least risky of assets in the crypto space are very risky. So I do agree that you wouldn't want to be adding any old community coin to the mix for collateral.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I didn't actually end up answering the question. I think what I'm excited about is projects working on liquid staking for governance. I think that would make a very good collateral type for xBacked.
Now, what is liquid staking for audience members that might not be aware?
Yeah, so imagine participating in governance and getting a token back instead of algos. And this token would be yield bearing, right? You could go back to whatever protocol you used to do liquid staking and claim not just your initial algos, but the algos accrued through governance. So that's a pretty high level. It just allows you to stake, but then not lose the capital you staked, and you can go and use it on xBacked and that sort of thing. Again, to the point of capital efficiency, it's a very capital efficient way of unlocking locked algos and collateral.
Awesome. And you mentioned the redemption process a little while ago, but are there other methods that xBacked is considering implementing to incentivize or otherwise help maintain the peg of xUSD?
Definitely. So another popular lever is an interest rate, and it's something we actually have to date not really wanted to do, but the more we sort of thought about it, the more it makes sense to have another lever that we can pull to keep the peg. And you've seen the recent proposal from ALGO adjusting the stable interest rate, and I think that's really interesting. And so I think having an interest rate in combination with redemptions makes a lot of sense. The other thing as well is people will be able to stake xUSD to participate in liquidations. So what does that mean? Usually liquidations are run by bots and they're built by developers, and that's it. What we're doing is similar to a platform on Terra called Kujira for Anchor. People will be able to stake xUSD, and then bots will actually be able to use that xUSD in liquidations. So it brings capital from people that can't build bots to people that can build bots and don't have capital, right? And so the people supplying and staking xUSD get the largest portion of the liquidation, and then the bot that ran it gets a very tiny fraction.
That's a really cool incentive that when I was doing a little bit of reading, I read that there's also other mechanisms to, share in the revenue of the protocol. Is that so?
Indeed, yeah. So I think I actually saw the clip where you were talking about this.
Yeah, I clipped it out of a live show where there was part of the discussion.
Yeah. People staking xUSD not only get discounted collateral from liquidations, but they'll also receive a share in fees generated by the protocol. And then governance token stakers will also receive a very large share of protocol fees. Now, the exact splits are likely going to change, at least in the near term, just because of what we have time to get audited, right? Mm-hmm. So we only can get 2 contracts audited, which means some contracts are going to have to wait until later in the year after we're in mainnet. That's, I guess, how people can participate in the xBacked protocol and how they can leverage the use of xUSD and the governance token to take part in the protocol and the fees generated.
That's terrific, honestly. How is the testnet going so far? Have you run into any issues?
Day one. So we actually had a closed testnet for a couple of weeks before we went public, and that was really, really good. And thank you to everyone who was a part of that, because it was pretty rough going, honestly. At that point, the very first thing, I think market makers in here, it was like, we can't open a vault. I was like, what do you mean you can't open a vault? We've tested that. But there was just like a few little usability things we hadn't thought of, which is natural. So we worked out those teething issues through those 2 weeks. And the biggest problem when we went live publicly was pop-ups from my ALGO. So pop-ups being blocked and people saying, my transactions are failing, what's going on? So there was a bit of an education piece around there. And then since then, it's been a pretty smooth experience. There's been the odd bug in validation or like on displaying information, but there's not been anything critical. So yeah, when we drop our liquidation UI, so you can actually participate in liquidations by clicking buttons and try to beat the bots. I'm sure there'll be some more bugs there. So that's sort of the next big UI feature that we'll be shipping this week.
Awesome. And the loans are essentially, the stablecoin is backed by an over collateralization of assets, and you said it was 120%. is there a reason behind that 120%? I've used it. I mean, I've seen it used, in AlgoFi's project. I just didn't know if there was a specific reason behind that, or if you've experimented with other collateral rates.
Yeah, so we could allow people to mint much closer to the 110% zone, but we haven't because we didn't want people to sort of shoot themselves in the foot. So the 110% collateral ratio is very low, but the reason is, when DAI has lost its peg, it's due to network congestion, right? So gas fees are through the roof. People can't repay their DAI. People can't liquidate DAI. And so things start getting crazy, right? Building on Algorand, if the claims are true and the trilemma is solved, we should never run into those problems. And so we can get away with a more capital efficient model out of the gate because we know liquidations and repayments will always happen on time. So I think that was why we decided to go with such a low collateral ratio. And in the future, it could even get lower. This is just sort of the starting point to get a feel for where a correct sort of collateral ratio should be.
Yeah. Now, could you foresee potentially, variable collateral rates depending on the type of asset that's supplied?
Definitely. Yeah. I think that's absolutely something we're going to consider.
I've asked the people from Folks Finance and AlgoFi, but I'm very curious on your take. What's your take on supplying NFTs as collateral in the future?
Oh yeah, really, really interesting topic. There's a pretty cool project I've seen on Twitter called Alandia NFT, I think, and they're doing P2P NFT loans, so you can put up an NFT and get a loan. And I really liked their approach because their approach to that is there's a time limit on repaying that. So if you don't repay it, then the NFT is seized, right? And I really like that because I think the hardest piece of NFTs in protocols like AlgoFi, xBacked, and Folks is an accurate price from a pricing oracle, right? That would be a custom job to begin with. And then there's a question, would you support just an individual NFT, or would you go, this is the ALGO vault, and we're just going to use the floor price, and that's that. And you just track the floor price. So I think given the popularity of NFTs, it's something that's in the back of our minds. Because again, back to the point about capital efficiency, it makes sense to consider it and how it might work down the track.
Yeah, I'm not too big into the NFT scene, but I definitely foresee a day where I'm able to use, maybe my Lofty AI real estate tokens as collateral on these protocols. I personally, I would be really excited about that. At what point does a liquidation happen? I think you mentioned it was, 110%? Is that?
Yeah, so as soon as your vault gets to 110%, liquidation begins, or it can begin if there's a bot out there watching. And then you get liquidated back to 120%. And so it works out to be, AlgoFi and lending protocols like Compound and that sort of thing, they do sort of a 50% liquidation. And that's because their collateral ratios are much higher. And so doing that puts the user back into a healthy position. With our protocol, it might seem unintuitive, but going from 110% back to 120%, you'll lose over 50% of your collateral in some cases due to the liquidators receiving a discount, right? So they're taking more collateral as they repay. But at least you're still left with some of your collateral. And so if you held all of your xUSD, right, and you get liquidated back, you have the opportunity to buy back your collateral at a discount, right, like on the market, and then you've got more collateral than when you started. So there's some interesting strategies you can think of there, I guess, but yeah, that's liquidations. Sorry if that didn't make sense. But yeah.
No, it did. Is there a way that people can run their own liquidation bots?
Great question. Yeah, definitely. So we'll be releasing our SDK pretty soon, so people can start doing these sorts of things in testnet. And there's not just liquidation bots people are going to be able to build. So we'll probably release some example code for the different, we'll call them keepers. That's a popular terminology in crypto. Keepers for the xBacked protocol. So we'll have people running liquidations. We'll also have people proposing vaults that can be redeemed against. Right? So we didn't really go through redemption mechanics before, but redemptions are made against the riskiest vault in xBacked. So the vault that has the lowest collateral ratio can be redeemed against, or the lowest two, sorry. And that collateral ratio might be perfectly healthy. Might be 115, 120, whatever it is. Now, when bots are proposing new vaults that are riskier than the current redeemable vaults, if they find a riskier vault, it's like a bounty. You'll receive 0.1% of that vault's collateral. So there's an incentive there for people running these bots constantly, because 0.1% might actually end up being a pretty decent amount of collateral. So there's that. And then there's also like the opportunity to collect fees. So fees, you might have seen in testnet, fees accrue in the contract, and anyone can trigger fee collection. The person that triggers fee collection gets 0.05% of those fees, and then the rest is split up, as we discussed before.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds honestly. You're making me much more excited for this project than I was before we spoke. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I'm glad.
Now, how will new assets be listed over time? Will that be left up to governance?
Excellent question. It's tricky. It is tricky. I think the initial like go BTC, go ETH, I think we'll probably do an informal like vote on Discord and hear what the community would want to see first. Go BTC, go ETH, or maybe even another asset at the time. We'll see.
Yep.
Because as you know, it's like a little bit down the track. And then I think it's very important the community is educated on the risks of introducing new collateral types to xBacked and what it could mean. So eventually, definitely, we would hand it over to community governance. Initially, I think it's important that there's high quality collateral on xBacked.
Perfect. And how will the X governance token be distributed?
Good question again. So there's a few launchpads now. I see them all the time on Twitter, and I'm really excited for launchpads to come to Algorand. I think everyone is excited for that. So I think that could be viable by the time we get to our token generation event. Other than that, it would be through liquidity mining on the protocol, or alternatively, depending on how things shape up, Delphi, one of our investors, they did this really cool study on something called a lock drop and LBA. And it's just a much better way to distribute governance tokens, and it has a much better incentive structure than your typical liquidity mining airdrop sort of situation. So I think that could be worth investigating, just to see if it's possible on Algorand. I would hope it is, or how we might modify it so it is possible. So that's kind of our thought. I think it is important that early adopters of the protocol benefit, because I think they're the most engaged users and they'll be the most engaged people in governance. But I will say, like, we won't do an airdrop or a sale or anything like that lightly if we end up even doing it. Just because, as I said, those governance tokens needs to go to those that are engaged in the protocol and will govern it correctly.
Yeah, I like the idea of rewarding early users. I mean, one, because they're obviously the biggest supporters, but also two, they have the most at stake, really, because they're the first ones to test a product that nobody really knows if it's going to hold up to any security issues. So, and of course, I have faith that it will, but you just really never know. So rewarding early backers is completely 100% on this end. Is the project going to be fully open sourced?
Oh, definitely, yeah. So we're just going to wait until we're audited,
Yep.
and then we'll be open sourcing our Reach code, which I think is actually massive. So I'm excited for them to open source HumbleSwap, and I'm super excited for us to open source xBacked, because I think then there'll be some very good examples of how to use Reach to
Hmm.
do certain things. And I think from there, builders will just go crazy. So yeah, super, super excited for that.
Cool. And do you are the servers running on AWS, or will anybody be able to run their own server or own node?
Good question. So we've been thinking about this, like how can we incentivize people to run different front ends?
Yeah.
So at one point, maybe there's a governance proposal that sort of sets aside, X% of tokens for the next couple of years are going to go to people running their own front ends. Now, to the point about servers, in a true DApp, there should only be a client and then everything else on the blockchain. There should never be a database in the background because that's a point of centralization. So we have done very well to not use a database. So the database is literally the blockchain. For the front end, we're using Netlify just to host our front end, and anyone could run a front end. And yeah, in the future, you could actually like update the front end to suit different types of people. So we might have a 120% collateral ratio, like you can mint up to that amount, but maybe another front end goes, hey, like we're here for the degens, and we're gonna let you mint right up to like 112% or something crazy. So yeah, there's that sort of opportunity as well.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you answering my questions. And how about we move a little bit on to some of these community questions? I see them piling up over here down in the chat. And for everyone watching, if you have any questions, just leave those in the chat, and we will be getting to those right now. So let's see. We have Market Maker, and he's asking the first question. What brought Austin into ALGO?
Yeah, definitely. So, like as I was saying before, I was very keen to get into DeFi and Web3, right? And I actually got introduced to Meld Ventures. So Michael from Meld Ventures, he actually lives in the same city I do. So we caught up, and I was super excited about what they were working on. And so we started brainstorming ideas, like what needs to be built, right? And originally they were like sort of talking about NFTs and that sort of thing. And at the time, this was sort of the beginning of 2021. I was like, ooh, quite hypey. I turned out to be wrong on that one.
Yeah. Me
But
too.
then,
Me too, to be fair.
yeah. And then we got talking more about like, decentralized stablecoin, the ecosystem really needs this. And so for me, as a product person, I just saw an opportunity to build an important product that would provide a lot of value in the ecosystem. And it also lined up with my interests in finance and that sort of thing. And I was just all in from that point.
Perfect. Yeah, I really do appreciate the idea of decentralized stablecoins because, these, USDC is great and all, but they could claw back or freeze your account at any point. So it's really, it's
Yeah.
not, even if you have your own keys, it's not really your own coin in that case. So um,
Yeah.
I do agree that it serves a significant purpose. Let's see. We actually have Market Maker again asking, what are some scenarios of the liquidation scenario? Like, what are some liquidation scenarios? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I have a doc that actually outlines step by step how liquidation would work and what it would look like, and I think it would be better to share that like in the chat or in our Discord or something after the call, because going through the explanation, just like talking through, could get quite messy and confusing. So I'd rather people read through the well thought out document rather than my shoddy explanation. I believe he was probably talking about like, how would you get from 110% back to 120? So I guess it's worth saying that liquidators would get a 3.5% discount. So they might pay 100 xUSD and repay the debt on the vault and receive $103 worth of ALGO. So that would be, and then they could go and sell that on a DEX for a profit. Boom, done. So it's not as high as other protocols, but I think with the extra incentives with staking xUSD and how liquidators don't need to bring their own capital because of this big pool over here, I think it works out quite nicely.
Yeah, I think that's an ingenious concept, to be honest. We have Algorand Governors Club asking or saying liquid staking sounds kind of like Guard. Is the team in contact with them?
Yeah, so Guard is super interesting. They are building, as far as I know, a stablecoin pegged to xUSD, and you're able to actually use your collateral in governance and receive the reward. So over time, your collateral ratio, similar to a product like Alchemix, would improve. But they are doing an xUSD stablecoin. So it's somewhat liquid staking, but a different project that's popped up is called Ali, I think. Well, I think it's Ali. And they're actually doing a wrapped algo, like a true wrapped algo. So if you deposit in your algos, they'll participate in governance and you can use your wrapped algo as collateral elsewhere. And so that's when I talk about liquid staking, what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm pretty
Perfect.
interested as well for more information to come out about Guard's system.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, I think all of these different ways that people can use their governance tokens and still use them in DeFi or borrow against them to participate in DeFi will be terrific because there's so much Algorand just sitting, not contributing to the growth of DeFi that's just sitting in this governance pool over here. So I agree that I would like to learn more, and I honestly really anticipate it. We have another question over here, also from Algorand Governors Club. He's actually asking, do you have any alpha to drop?
I feel like I've dropped a lot of alpha today. What do you want from me?
I agree. Well, to be fair, this was probably a little bit earlier in the show. So let's move on to the next question here. All right. EA is asking, what advice would you give new developers using Reach versus PyTeal?
Well, I think what advice? Like keep using Reach. I think if you want to learn about the differences, I wrote a Twitter thread on this a couple of weeks ago. I think the core difference is, in my opinion, there's a lot of benefits, but for me, writing a smart contract in something that isn't PyTeal or Teal made a lot of sense. You get formal verification, and then when you hook it up to your front end, they take care of all of the SDK calls, all of the transaction groupings, everything. It becomes super, super easy to integrate with the front end, which means developers who are more focused on front end and design and that sort of thing don't need to worry about that, and they can just focus on making a great user experience. Feel free to jump in our Discord. We have a Reach chat, a Reach channel. We can talk a little bit more about it there if there's anything specific you're wondering.
Awesome. And I believe that just about wraps it up for the questions. I do see one more. I'm going to click on this. Oh, I see two more now. Awesome. Not sure if this is entirely serious, but if it is, we should just give a general definition anyway. So what is a stablecoin?
So you've got two types of stablecoins. You have centralized, decentralized. Centralized is something like USDC, where there is fiat dollars in a bank account. So it's like their pegging mechanism is literally redemption. You can always redeem a USDC token for a US dollar in fiat. That's how they maintain their peg, right? So with that comes all of the centralized requirements, right? So you must have clawback, you must have freeze, and all of that sort of thing, right? Then you have decentralized. And so this means there's different types of decentralized. You have over collateralized, like xBacked and stable and DAI, or you have completely algorithmic, like UST on Terra. And so then there's no collateral. It's just purely maintained through arbitrage to maintain a stable value. So that's, I think, the explanation.
No, it's a great explanation. And I actually wasn't aware that that's how UST maintained their peg. So even I'm learning something from that definition. Let's see. Are there any emergency protocols in the event of a depeg? And I know we mentioned redemption, but is that the only one?
This is a good question. So we did look at introducing a recovery mode to the protocol, similar to DAI. And what this would do is it would encourage people to come and repay their debt and a few other things. But we kind of removed it in favor of another feature called deprecation. And so deprecation, it sounds a little bit dangerous, but basically, if we wanted to upgrade the smart contract, or if there was a nasty bug that was affecting funds and that sort of thing, we can sort of enter a shutdown mode where all that can happen is liquidations and withdrawals, so people can withdraw from their vaults, and debt repayment. So I think if things were getting crazy and people were minting too much xUSD, we could probably prevent it that way. But at the moment, there's no like recovery mode similar to DAI. And I will say, partially that is because the AVM has very strict limitations when it comes to what's possible. Like they have a maximum smart contract length. They have a maximum like transaction opcode cost. So I think as we see new versions of the AVM come out this year, like AVM 1.1 introduces contract-to-contract calls, that'll be massive. AVM 1.2, I think, is going to be alleviating some global storage problems. That's probably an alpha leak. Whoops. And then we'll see what else happens. But those two upgrades alone will mean we can investigate how we can improve our protocol in like a V2 update later this year or early next year.
Awesome. And we have one last question that I'm seeing, and we did cover this, so I'm just going to let Daniel know. He's asking, have there been any testnet bugs so far? And we covered this earlier in the episode. I don't know if you're a little late, but just watch back. This will be posted as soon as we're done going live. It usually only takes about 2 minutes, and then you can rewatch. And let's see. Let's just do a quick check. Yep, I don't see any more. Is there anything that we haven't covered yet today that you'd like to share with my audience?
Probably join the Discord. I'm going to plug the Discord because we're going to be doing a lot over the next few months leading into mainnet. There was a question actually, I think, around like an NFT collab similar to what Folks is doing for Testnet. I think someone asked that in the chat.
Did I miss it?
I'm not sure. I think it just like it flew by. But yeah, I think people should join the Discord to make sure they're kept up to date with what we're planning in the next few weeks and months.
Perfect. You heard it here. Join the Discord. I believe there's a link in the description, at least for the website and the testnet. I will throw one in there for the Discord too, just to help you out. And I appreciate you answering all my questions and all the audience questions.
Yeah, it was fantastic, JT. Really enjoyed it.
It was great to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show. And, I'll be happy to have you on when we get closer to mainnet.
Definitely. Yeah, get keen.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, and take care.
All right. See ya.
See you later. All right, everybody, I appreciate you sticking around to the end. That was my conversation with Austin from xBacked. If you like the content, smash that thumbs up button, consider subscribing to the channel, and we will catch you in the next one. Thanks.